All right, so this is probably the most difficult session of today, right after lunch, so I want to make sure we keep you awake. So thanks for the introduction. My name is Zakir. As mentioned, I run the Asia region for NetSuite, which is the #1 ERP cloud company. And for those of you who are familiar with NetSuite, we got acquired by Oracle last year, so we're part of a bigger ecosystem. But we're very excited. We have a fantastic session planned for you in the next 25 minutes or so. We're going to talk about disruptive technology and how cloud is transforming businesses. And with that, I'd like to welcome two gentlemen to the stage to talk about the topic at hand. Dave, if you want to please come up. Dave is with, come on up, I'll get Cole, come on up, please. Good to see you. Welcome. Have a seat, please. So instead of me doing an introduction, why don't I get you to talk a little bit about yourself, your background, and your organization, please? Dave, I'll start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Zakir. So, hi everyone. I'm Dave Ng. I'm from B Capital Group. We are a global venture fund based out of San Francisco, LA, and Singapore. We, typically invest in, across Series A to C in tech companies. So. A little bit about myself. I'm actually Malaysian, right? So, my hometown is in Malacca. Prior to this, spent close to 20 years in the U.S. Out of that, 15 years in Silicon Valley. Has done, a lot of work in the technology space, mainly in enterprise technology. And also, work at startups like Zuora back in the early days when, the company has less than 100 guys. And then, by the time I finally left and went to investing, we crossed 100 million in revenue. So, have definitely been on that side of the table. And right now, has been with B Capital, looking into investment, focusing on Southeast Asia and India.
Great, thank you. Cole, please.
Hello, my name is Cole Sirucek. I'm the co-founder and CEO of DocDoc. We're Asia's largest doctor discovery and patient empowerment company. We've been in operations for about 4 years, and we're in 8 countries. I've lived in Asia for 13 years. I started the company with my wife, who's in the front row here. I'd like to give a shout out to her. Just happy to be here. We've been using NetSuite since the very beginning.
Great. So perfect segue into what, to start the conversation. So Cole, I'll start with you. Disruption, overused term, in my opinion, different definitions. As one of the leading disruptors and a leading healthcare network or service provider in Asia, how do you see your business transforming from the time you start to what you're doing today? And as an executive and founder of the organization, how you're utilizing cloud or technology to be able to disrupt the industry?
Well, I appreciate the word leading used with DocDoc several times in that question. I think disruption is also a very overused word. I think that disruption in business and in life means the same thing. It means to interrupt a process. In a positive sense, when you disrupt a process, the new process that comes into place is better than the old. But in the case of a tornado running through a village, it's worse. So disruption just simply means to interrupt a process. I think startups, I think a lot of people, when they start companies, they think, oh, I'm going to disrupt X, or I'm going to disrupt Y, or I'm going to make this so much better. And I think what they find about midway through that process is that there were a lot of things they didn't understand in that industry that explain the current state of affairs. And that's why you see so many pivots, and that's why you see so many adjustments that have to be made. It's because you learn a lot on your entrepreneurial journey, and that's what it is. There's almost no companies in the world that have the Facebook experience, where 2 founders start it and bang, it rips and has infinite access to everything from the moment it starts. Most people have a real struggle and a real journey they go through. And I think that having access to data, building primary systems that allow you to actually see what's happening in your business, I think that's fundamental to being able to adjust. Whether that's adjustment to improve execution or whether that's adjustment to new markets or serving a customer in a different way, I think it's having primary systems and having access to data on a really granular level that's what it means, I think. I think that's the essence of being able to understand your market.
I'll come back to a couple of things you brought up in your comments. Well, Dave, get your perspective on it. You have a interesting view because you worked at technology companies. You originally from the region, and then having lived in the Silicon Valley, you've seen a lot of disruption and a lot of companies that have come and disrupted. And as you look for funding into these organizations, what are your experience, your journey through this, and what have you seen sort of the trends in terms of what causes disruption, and how do you measure that, especially in organizations that you're looking to fund in the future?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, when I look into, you know, what is a disruption, right? You know, very simple. At least on a personal basis, you know, something that really will just cause me to stop and just say like, wow, right? You know, I've been on both sides of things, right? Being a builder in a company itself, and now being an investor, looking into, you know, what are some of the next exciting thing that would, you know, really cause me to just stop and shift all my attention and really trying to, you know, figure out. So, you know, disruption in a positive sense, right, is really, the way I look at it is really something that can, you know, drastically, potentially change user behavior, change consumer paradigm, right? So WeChat in China, it changes the entire way how people live and behave today. You know, everything can be transacted digitally, right? So that is huge disruption. From my perspective, when I was at Zuora, you know, we are basically, you know, trying to build a subscription management platform that allows any company that wants to, you know, take on the subscription business model to automate their business process for a subscription business model, right? So the technology that we built is meant to disrupt the industry. So, you know, from that lens back then, you know, I was, you know, I would basically be putting on, you know, a product hat and basically thinking on the kind of product that I can build that basically change how people function on a day-to-day basis. And now as an investor, you know, those are the kind of companies that I look into as well.
Okay. A follow-on question from that. How do you stay on top of this disruptive technology? What are kind of the key areas you look for as you're doing a wide spectrum analysis or a deep dive into a lot of these organizations? Any recurring themes that you see? What do you look for, and how do you differentiate the disruptors from the Me Too products or Me Too technology?
Yeah, that is a great question. And you know, when I look into startups and, you know, and I speak to founders all the time, I think there is, you know, a couple of things that really stand out. You know, so we tend to look for, you know, the best team, the best people out there. We tend to try to understand, you know, what are they trying to do, right? What is the idea here? What is the vision here? And what have they accomplished? And I think the one very common recurring theme that eventually stood out is all these great companies that ends up, you know, getting a lot of support and attention from investors tends to be disrupting something, right? So they're building either a great technology, product, or offering a great service that is going to really change how things are going to be done today. So I think that is one recurring theme that, you know, by the end of the day, when we filter down to some of the best companies that interest us, they tend to be disrupting, you know, how things are being done today.
Great, thank you. Cole, I'll use the word leading again with DocDoc. You're doing something pretty revolutionary, hasn't been done before, especially in the region, providing a new consumer experience. Having started the company as the founder and as an executive, what are your main business concerns at the moment, and what do you look for to be able to stay ahead of the curve?
So I think startups need to be kind of the grass that grows between the elephant's toes, particularly in healthcare. There are so many giant organizations that are really entrenched in healthcare, from your provider networks and hospitals, your insurance companies, governments in many groups. And so you have to be that kind of grass that grows beneath or in between the toes. And so for me, what I want to stay on top of is am I really delivering value to my customer? I mean, are they delighted with the experience? And how does delighting a consumer, how does that empower the larger players to be more effective in whatever they're doing? So, you know, a friend of mine, I grew up part of my time in Hawaii, and one of the founders of AOL became a pretty good friend of mine. And he wrote a book, and he's talking about Internet 3.0, and how the internet is now moving into these more grown-up industries, things like minerals and mining and industrial processes and healthcare. These are big league industries, and they're complex from a regulatory perspective. The regulations are different from region to region. The consumer experience is really life or death. And in these kind of industries, there's really no room for fast and loose play. There's no room to, you know, when you're dealing with consumer information, patient's medical information, and you're trying to really make a what we call deep discovery recommendation to help them to determine which provider to go to when they have cancer, it's an awesome responsibility. And so, yeah, you know, I think that what I look at here is having a real grown-up management team. I think it's critical. I think I look at, do I trust if 10 decisions a week that can be made that potentially could really damage the company, do I have executives there that I trust to make those decisions? Do I have established relationships with the big players? Do I understand what they're thinking? And am I delighting the customer on the ground? And I think if you do those three things and you're real tenacious, you're inevitably going to win, because this is a space where almost nobody can execute, frankly speaking. You know, there's a lot of teams, a lot of people come in and they make a lot of noise and a lot of press releases and a lot of media, and then when you dig into the business, you realize they just didn't get anything done, because it's real hard and there's a lot of interconnected pieces. And this is part of the reason why I'm such a big fan of NetSuite, because when you're starting to deal with patient records, when you're dealing with doctors and doctors' information, when you're dealing with insurance companies, you know, in a lot of ways we're an arms dealer for the insurance industry, you know, by actually helping the insurance industry for the first time in its history to become really consumer-centric and to really empower the consumer to make more informed health decisions. And when you're moving in those roads and swimming in those circles, you have to have auditable primary systems. It's just impossible from one person to do it all, and so you have to have these systems in place and this workflow in place, and you just can't do it without a system like NetSuite. I mean, there are others out there, but yours is the most agile, and that's why we picked it.
Great decision there. So Cole, on this same train of thought, I do want to ask you, I know you're using NetSuite, and good to hear that you're getting value out of it. In terms of visibility into your business, cloud, again, just like I talked about disruption being an overused term, cloud is an overused term as well, and different definitions of that. Obviously, NetSuite and the likes of other cloud companies are leading the wave or the path in that area. Are you thinking about other technologies, because in your space, staying agile and flexible and nimble is very important? What type of visibility are you looking for in your business to be able to, again, continue the growth that you're seeing? Aside from having a strong management team, is there reporting and other access to other data that you look for?
Yeah, so here's one of the big things. As an operator, so I was a former investor, and then I came into operations, and we started this company largely because of a very personal situation with our daughter, and we had to do a liver transplant, and I was the donor, and we had this epiphany of something the world needed, and that's really why Grace and I started this company, and we started out being a listings business. We thought that's what we thought what Discovery was going to be. And as we really dug into the business and we understood more about what the consumer's actual needs and desires were, and not just my needs or your needs or the people in this room, but a taxi driver in Kuala Lumpur, Vietnam, or Indonesia, what became clear to us was we had to have a really clean data model. And this is one of these things where, as an investor, I'd really dig into a lot of the digital products that are being built today in Southeast Asia in particular, because there's a very poor ecosystem of talent in the region that's actually grown digital products from the ground up. There's a lot of developers, full stack and otherwise, but there aren't a lot of, from what I've seen, product architects, software product architects. And so what you end up happening is their databases, as opposed to being clean data models that allow for a lot of agility around currency, a lot of agility around, well, we thought we were going to be charging a subscription base, but now we're charging a % of revenue, as an example, or we thought we were going to be displaying these 20 types of data, but actually it's these other 50 that we've been collecting that are really relevant. If you don't set up your database in a very flexible way early on and you don't architect that well, the business you literally have to rebuild the entire product the moment you develop any kind of product market fit. And that talent is just really hard to find. So for us, we were really fortunate. One of our board members was one of NetSuite's largest customers, and he did the rollout with NetSuite for all of Starbucks. And he came to us and he said, day one, start with NetSuite, start thinking data model. That saved us years. Particularly in healthcare, it saved us years. Now when we're, we have some of the largest insurance companies in Asia as a major clients for us, and they look at our access to data, they look at how we can cut that data. Well, that's only because we saved it in a relational database with a lot of flexibility day one. And particularly in Internet 3.0, that's going to be the difference between success and failure for many of these businesses. That's my opinion.
Great. Turning to a little bit of on a side note, a lot of organizations, when they look at disruption, they think about startups. Our view on it, Dave, is every startup needs to think like a big company, and every big company needs to think like a startup, because you need to stay nimble and agile. What have you seen from a regional perspective in terms of Southeast Asia? There are Malaysia's done a great job of incubating a lot of startups and disruptive technology. Singapore is doing its part. Where do you see the biggest challenges and the biggest opportunities for disruption and for technology in this region as an investor?
Yeah, so that's a very good point. I think innovation and disruption can really come in all forms, or from any organization, right? It can be from startups. Naturally, they are trying to build something that is differentiating to basically offer that value to customer and outside and to the market. While large organization itself, I think a lot of them are also thinking into how can they continue to be innovative? How can they continue to be transformative, right? And that's part of the whole larger macro agenda that we see today in the region. Where in Malaysia, you have folks like MDAC, right, pushing really hard on the digital economy, and because realizing that, right, as even at a country level, right, you really need to think about how you continue to stay at a cutting edge. How do you then bring in some of the more nimble model, right? So these are some of the programs like Digital Hub, right, at the macro level. At a company level, from my days at the corporate, right, there are various ways, various initiatives that people are looking at, and this could be from the form of accelerators, incubators, right? That we see a lot increasingly in Southeast Asia. So, for example, in financial services, a lot of the banks now, they have accelerators, they have incubator program. They are essentially looking into how to partner with some of the startups out there in the fintech space to see how can they support the disruption, right? I mean, it's a little bit ironic because these guys are building something that hopefully they're trying to disrupt the incumbents, but the big guys are actually looking into the garage and say, how can we work with startups and emerging technologies early on so that at the right point, we can actually make it additive to us, bring it to us, help us to enhance and build our capabilities rather than be totally disruptive. So I think from an opportunity perspective, we actually believe that there is a lot of room for innovative startups to work together with a lot of the large companies out there. And the startups will benefit from the ability to scale their business. The large company will benefit from access to new innovative solutions and plug in some of the product gaps. But from a challenge perspective, I think when we talk about challenges, it's always how do the small guys get to the big guys, right? I mean, being able to actually get attention of a large corporate it's not easy, right? It's just given that, you know, a larger corporate typically have more layers. They might not move as quick, as nimble as a startup one, right? So there's you know, from time to time, there's a mismatch in timeline. There's a mismatch in just getting the door open, being able to get to talk to the right person that will be a sponsor or champion of what you're trying to propose to them is key, right? So that's where, you know, as investor, we think that, you know, this is something that we can come in and help to provide a bridge, right? Help to bridge the gap and help to, you know, line up this conversation and provide a pathway to working together as well.
Great, thank you. Cole, every time I hear the DocDoc story, I'm fascinated. There's a personal aspect to it, and operating in 8 countries and growing at a phenomenal pace. So, fantastic job there, and congratulations. 5 years from now, where do you see your business?
So, how much do I want to share? So, there's a fundamental problem in the healthcare industry. It's completely and utterly unacceptable. And my wife and I hit this with our daughter when we had to find a really top-notch Jedi team of doctors to do a liver transplant for us. And our daughter was 100 days old at the time. And it amazes me. I think DocDoc, I know DocDoc is going to transform what it means to consume healthcare. And the way it's going to do it is you're going to start finding doctors the way in which you buy an automobile, the way in which you make any large, important decision. You're going to have access to data about physicians. You're going to be able to compare physicians. You're going to understand that quality in healthcare is a function of 3 variables: price, outcome, and experience. And you're going to be able to hold doctors accountable, right? Just like in every other industry, the internet is hit. It has ultimately permeated and led to consumer empowerment. And so 5 years from now, DocDoc's going to be the company that led the edge of consumer empowerment in healthcare around doctor discovery. We're going to be the #1. We'll be the Lockheed Martin of arms dealers to the largest insurance companies in the world. And we'll also probably be the largest second opinion company for outbound Chinese medical tourists. But really what it all comes back to is we're going to be the best friend that you never had, that you needed when the shit hit the fan and you needed to figure out which doctor was best for your particular course of care. Or when you were the patriarch of your family and you needed to help your daughter or your parents find the right doctor, DocDoc's going to be top of mind for you. Whether you're a tier 1 insured customer or whether you're a cash-paying medical traveler. It's all the same nucleus. The genius of the idea that makes DocDoc what it is today is really consumer empowerment based on data and quality to find the right doctor, clinic, and hospital.
Amazing story. Dave, you're talking to entrepreneurs all the time, and as you're evaluating different organizations, what would be your advice or suggestion, recommendation to the audience as they're looking at disruptive technology, as they're looking to build a business or to improve a business which is already of a certain size? What are the key, some of the key things that you would recommend in terms of here are the key attributes that make a successful company as an executive team, here's the disruptive technology, or some of the key technology you should be looking at to be able to take your business to the next level?
Certainly. You know, there are definitely a couple of attributes that we looked at, and you know, if I were just to offer my 2 cents, I think, you know, the first #1, you know, thing to basically consider is always, are you truly, you know, trying to take on a large enough, significant problem that where today there is a huge gap in the market, right? Are you solving a large enough problem? Are you solving a problem that people cares, right? So, you know, for the case of DocDoc, for example, you know, they are looking to solve a very real and large problem in the healthcare sector, right? So I think that's very important because that defines your market opportunity. That also defines, you know, where you pick your problem. Also defines, you know, what kind of potential investors or angels that might be interested in investing in you, right? certain sectors attract interest from certain groups, certain corporates, certain investors, and so forth. Two is more so in this part of the world, right? I mean, many times, people say that, hey, there aren't a lot of, sexy tech startups that's coming out of Southeast Asia, right? All your kind of deep learning or artificial intelligence stuff is always coming out from the more mature markets. So does that mean, entrepreneurs have less of a challenger or less of a market to tackle, right? The answer is no, right? Just because I think, a lot of the startups that we see here are actually tackling something very true, very real as well, right? It may be more along the side of a tech-enabled business model innovation, but they are solving something that's very real, right? Grab, for example, Gojek, right? They are basically trying to make, transportation more efficient, right? Very real problem. Are these rocket science, are these rocket science problems that they are trying to solve? Probably not, but they are solving something very real. They are applying the best technology to try to tackle this in this market, right? So, these are the things that we look for. As entrepreneur builds and scale company, and if I were to just put on a different hat, right, from my days as Zuora, trying to envision the end state is very important as well. Basically, having a point of view on where your startup will be 5 to 7 years from here, right? And essentially that you want to start thinking early on, especially from, let's say, a technology infrastructure perspective, right? What kind of technology you need to have in place? Maybe not today. Maybe you're still small to use, let's say, potentially a cloud, infrastructure or service. But as you grow, as you scale, right, you need to have that clear idea in terms of, your roadmap, how you're going to bring in, some of this enabler to your business to grow.
Thank you. Cole, any final words for the audience? You've grown as I've said a few times, a great successful business. Any pitfalls or any mistakes you have made along the way that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I got a good one. So I grew up in Hawaii, and we used to go out to the Big Island and sit and drink beer and watch the lava pour off into the ocean. And it's really fun just to watch the lava just kind of pouring off. And men sitting there drinking beer, inevitably you have to go to the bathroom. So what do you think the men would do? Every time, like clockwork, they'd go piss on the lava, right? And when you're peeing on lava, a very curious thing happens. The urine bursts into flames, right? And you're like, how is that possible? When you see that, you're like, this is really cool, right? So now you're drinking more and you're sitting there pissing on lava, right? Well, urine isn't flammable, right? It turns out that anything you throw on lava works, right? Anything you throw on lava bursts into flames. And so when you're starting a company, you think you have this amazing idea. Eureka, I'm doing it, I believe in it, here we go. And you think, I don't need to worry about that system. I don't need to worry about this thing or that thing. We're going to grow so fast and these other things, those will take care of themselves. And it is true. I'll never forget, I invested in Facebook when I was at Temasek, and I remember walking in, and the company was worth billions of dollars at the time, and I asked them where their finance system was, and they pointed to a shoebox full of receipts. Right? They were growing so fast, they didn't even have time to put in place a financial system. And it worked for them, and that's amazing. But for everybody else in this room, it's probably not going to be that easy. It's going to be really, really hard. And you're going to iterate and hit a wall, and most people are going to tell you it's not going to work. And then you're going to have to push through it into the next level, and then they're going to tell you it's not going to work for a different reason. Then you're going to get into your big corporates, and at every level, they're going to want to cover their ass at every level, and you're going to have to move like 8 people in unison from 4 divisions, and you're going to want to pull your hair out, and the only way you're going to win is if you have better systems and better data, and you're more organized, and you're more vigilant, and your team is just better, and you don't give up. And so this is why I'm so adamant about putting primary systems in place early in companies, either as an investor or as an entrepreneur, because primary systems help you get organized. Primary systems like NetSuite, primary systems that are integrated in your CRM and your ERP, that allows you to take an employee that's new to the company and make them effective faster. That allows you when an employer says, hey, well, tell me about this, and then you're able to call your guy and get a report drafted really quickly and show them the data. It's like, wow, right? And that makes corporates have more faith in you. That makes, so I think start early. Don't assume you're going to piss on lava and cover up all your mistakes, right? Know that it's going to be really hard. Start with primary systems early and think about your data model. That would be my advice. Thank you, guys.
Great. Thank you very much, Cole. Thank you, Dave, for sharing your stories.
Thanks, everyone.
I think you're going to be around for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I think we both are, yeah?
So if you have any questions, please feel free to. I'll be here. If you'd like to learn more about NetSuite, we have a breakout session and a public demo across in the room there. But thank you again for your participation. And that brings this session to a close. Thank you.